Boom. All right, let's get to it. So as you can already tell by the subject title, we are tying chironomids today. Just quickly before I get into showing you guys how to tie a basic chironomid, today we're going to tie the Chromie, one of my all-time favorites for Stillwater. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you want to look for when you're tying your chironomids. And for the most part, what I see are common beginner mistakes when you're tying your chironomids is that you're tying them with either too small or too large of a bead. Typically on a chironomid hook, maybe a Daiichi or a Togen's, you're fishing for a size 16, you fish a 5/64 size bead, either in brass or tungsten, depending on your preference. And going down in size to an 18, you're fishing a 1/16 usually. Sometimes on different patterns you can upsize the bead just by one size if you'd like, but for the most part, having a good bead size that mimics the original taper to a chironomid is really key to presenting a nice tapered chironomid down to those fish. So for the most part, either upsizing or downsizing the bead is usually one of the bigger mistakes I see. It kind of creates a bulky looking chironomid that looks less appetizing to the fish and mimics the real insects down there a little bit less than you'd like to. So I'm going to add a couple little examples here. You'll probably see them show up. And the first one's going to be with a size 12 chironomid with a 1/16 bead on it. And this is a less common mistake than upsizing the beads, but nonetheless, it kind of creates a poor taper to the chironomid and overall doesn't look as appealing as the usual really nice chironomids that you see online there. And then the second one is a size 18 with a 3/32 bead. And a lot of you might think that, oh, it helps my fly sink down faster, but a lot of people, what they have on their leader is a swivel to help sink that rig a little quicker. So the swivel is going to do the work, help your fly sink down quite quickly, keep that leader straight so you know when a fish takes your fly, you don't need to upsize the bead. Keep it slender, keep it good profile, and you're going to find that it fishes quite a bit better than your bulky flies. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here and we can start with the tying. All right, guys, so for simplicity's sake, today I'm going to tie on a size 12 Daiichi 1760. This is usually the preferred hook because it comes in 2x strong, so the wire on that chironomid here is going to be twice as strong as a 1x or a typical dry fly hook, which is going to bend out a little bit easier than this hook. So for the most part, this is kind of the typical hook people will see or people will tie with on their chironomids. Togen's makes one, Daiichi makes a good one. There's tons of companies out there that make a good, strong chironomid hook. On the end here, we are using a 3/32 black nickel bead. This is just brass. I don't tend to tie many of my chironomids with tungsten. Just for that reason, I'm tying hundreds of chironomids a winter, and tungsten is just too expensive. I don't mind waiting a little longer to let my chironomids sink to the bottom there. So the next part, I'm going to show you guys the typical method to tie the gill material on to your chironomids. For the most part, I like to use a UTC 70 and the rusty brown. For most of my chironomids, especially the ones like a Chromie or anything with like a chrome body or that kind of ASB body, I like to use rusty brown, especially for when I tie up to the collar material there. Having that wing casing or that collar on your chironomid tied with a rusty brown really helps mimic that. Some guys will use goose biot and kind of go over the top and tie a super fancy fly, but for me it's production. I'm just tying to fill my box. I don't need them to look like $1 million. I just need them to work. So like I said in the beginning of the video, I usually want to tie my 3 basic chironomids. Is a good staple to start with when you're getting into fly fishing, especially Stillwater. The first one is a Chromie, which I'm going to show you here. The second one is called a Black Sally. That's usually tied with a snow white cone at the head, and that will replace tying in gills or anything like that. And it's tied with a black UTC and a red or cranberry Flashabou. And then the third almost a must in anyone's Stillwater fly box is called a limey, and that's like a bright watermelon green or light olive green UTC thread for the body, and then a silver wire for the ribbing. You'll see that in your stomach pumps, especially if you've gotten into like the throat pumping techniques. You'll see them a lot in like the end of May, early June. You'll find them popping up, and usually those are in like the size 18, 16 size chironomid hooks. All right, so let's start with the gill material there. Quickly to talk about gill material, there's a couple different materials that people like to use. One of them is a glow yarn. That's in the white as well. My preferred is the Uni-Stretch in white. I find that this is just easier to work with. It makes a cleaner finish. Another typical gill material people use is white Antron. You can find all of those at your local fly shop. If you happen to be in Kelowna, Trout Waters carries them all. All right, so I'm just going to do a couple wraps with that thread. I'm going to peel off a long strand of that Uni-Stretch. I usually leave it on the spool. Tie that in close to the eye. 2 or 3 wraps just to lock it down. Then grab your whip finishing tool. And you're going to 2 or 3 turns with the whip finish. Pull it tight. Cut the thread. And this, now you can slide the bead over top of that thread, kind of folding that Uni-Stretch over. I like to cut the gill just in front of the eye of the hook. Oh, come back to me. Just like that. Perfect. So you don't see any of the thread. The bead kind of covers the thread wraps there, and that gill material just kind of flares out in front of the bead. All right, tie your thread back behind the chironomid again. Cut that off. For the body material on the Chromie, I'm going to use a Uni Mylar. And because we're tying in a size 12, this one already says number 12 on it, but it's in the 3/64 width. All right, an important note to make with this, the underside of this Mylar is gold, the top side is the silver that we want. So I'm going to tie it down the shank of the hook with the gold facing up. All right, and for the ribbing, we're going to do a bronze Flashabou. This one's tied or made by Superfly. Just going to cut off one strand. Tie that in. All right, and an important note I like to make, whenever I'm tying chironomids, I will spin my UTC bobbin to the left, counterclockwise. And what that does is that allows that thread to flatten out. It gets quite wound up if you've been doing quite a few wraps. And what I like to do with that flat thread is build a more smooth taper that's going to help that Mylar lay down flatter, kind of give it just a better finish to the chironomid. All right. Work it down the shank. You'll see me do a couple spins every once in a while. Keep the back of the chironomid quite thin, only go down once to the end of the hook there. I'll work it all the way to the top. And now I'm going to twist it, and I'm going to build that body by going back down the shank of the hook about 2/3 of the way this time. All right, I'm going to go just before halfway, kind of come up to the top, do a whip finish to lock that down, hang it on the bottom cradle. Oh. All right, so I'm going to grab that Mylar, and once I fold it over, that silver side will be showing just like you can see in the camera. Keep those wraps nice and close, overlapping just a little bit, creating that smooth taper to that chironomid. All right, once you're at the head here, grab your thread, and you're going to want to lock it down, 2 or 3 good wraps. A little technique I like to use here, instead of using a pair of scissors, I like to use a single razor wire or razor blade, and that way you can get a closer cut to the body versus where scissors will kind of leave a little stub kicking out of the bottom. And I find when you apply the glue at the end there, it just kind of gives it a cleaner finish if you're using the flat razor. All right, so now the strand of bronze, we're going to start wrapping that up to create this segmentation of the chironomid. And it's important to note that usually a chironomid has 6 or 7 kind of body segmentations, so we're going to want to mimic that with our tinsel here, Flashabou. That's 5, 6, 7. All right, and then grab the thread off the cradle again. Couple wraps. Grab your little razor blade, trim it off, and we'll whip finish it again. Perfect. All right, keep getting out of focus there, but we'll trim it with the razor blade again. And I like just to finish off the fly with a brush on glue, usually super glue or a hard as hull. This is the Penetrator. It's quite thin, so it keeps that thin chironomid body without building it up too much. So with the thread, or sorry, not with the thread, with the brush, I'll do a nice coat the whole chironomid, and if you want, you can do a second or a third application just to make that fly last that much longer. Boom, just like that. There you have it. That is the Chromie. Perfect. Thanks for watching, guys.